Not only that, but when we release the things that are blocking us and unburden, like shame, for example, and we unblock our hearts and we open the passageway for life to flow through us, essentially what we're doing is we're opening ourselves up to abundant, unlimited possibility, which is AKA I call God. And we open to grace. We open to relief. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to my podcast. Hannah Mae here. How's everybody doing? How did you do after last week's episode? Today, we're going to segue nicely into forgiveness of self in order to open up and access our true selves, our full potential, all this good stuff that we all really, really strive for oftentimes. And really in our heart of hearts, we know that's what we want. And we want it because we know it's possible. And there's that drive there to do that. So the good thing about that is that it gives us a lot of resilience. It gives us a lot of endurance to be able to push through challenging things. And the work of self-forgiveness can feel particularly challenging, especially at the onset, because why? It means we have to face ourselves. We have to show up ruthlessly, compassionately, and honestly. Did I say that right? You know what I mean. So last week we talked about forgiveness of others mainly, and just from the perspective of moving from anger to forgiveness and how that really is a process that is designed to set you free. I mean, there is the whole other piece that I didn't go into of how actually it's a great service and a kindness for somebody else when you set them free and you let them off the hook, energetically speaking, spiritually speaking. It's not your job to keep anyone on the hook. And so when it comes to ourselves, who's going to let us off the hook if it's not us? And when it comes to deep self-compassion and forgiveness, a lot of us might not know that we're harboring resentment towards ourselves. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that might look like, how that might show up, how you can be able to identify where you're blocked, and the whole purpose and reason of why self-forgiveness matters, why it's so important and crucial, and why it's really the thing. It's not just like the icing on top. Oh, that's extra credit. Like, no, this is the work, because when you prioritize and you restore your relationship with yourself, that is the foundation of every other relationship that you have. And it's going to impact what you're able to receive, what you're able to give. And it's just so beautiful. And it's such sacred work. And so we'll dive into a little bit about the sacred nature of this work and what's required of it and what I have found to be especially helpful with it. So stay with me, folks. Don't leave. Don't leave. You're going to be moved and touched by this. Last week, people were really affected, and it told me that the words really had a lot of resonance, and there was some really beautiful little shifts that happened for people in just allowing these words to just flow in and settle in and create those shifts. Because when things resonate as truthful, then they immediately get to work on us. And that's just awesome. Like, our words have so much power. So why do we want to self-forgive? Why do we want to find this compassion for ourselves? Because just like how it blocks our relationships with others, this is the thing that's going to bridge that gap back to ourselves. Compassion is the bridge that will allow us to come back to ourselves. Why do we want to come back to ourselves? Well, that's our home. The alternative would be to be in full flight from yourself, which a lot of people do. They walk around and they're not able to be present. And if they're not able to be present with themselves and they can't be present in their lives to really appreciate what they have, they don't have gratitude. Gratitude is a state that's going to raise our frequency and shift and elevate our state of being greatly. And joy, like, how can we be joyful and experience joy and celebrate life and appreciate what we have and all the beauty around us and all the gifts and the opportunities that are there for us if we're closed to it and we don't have gratitude? Not only that, but when we release the things that are blocking us and unburden, like shame, for example, and we unblock our hearts and we open the passageway for life to flow through us, essentially what we're doing is we're opening ourselves up to abundant, unlimited possibility, which is AKA I call God. And we open to grace, we open to relief, we open to providence, we open to the divine and to spirit being able to flow and live through us and fill our vessel so that we don't have to try and fill it with some crap that like doesn't work and just leaves us disappointed and in a trough. So we really want to clear this vessel. We really want to reconnect. We really want to be able to get present with ourselves. So some other reasons why self-forgiveness really matters, and this might be a motivator for you, is if we don't, and if we hold on to shame and self-resentment, and we don't accept ourselves as we are, then we block abundance, right? And not just financial. Like sometimes people hear the word abundance and they think it's a material, financial abundance, not excluding that for sure. But there's lots of ways we can block abundance in our life. And that's just all the beautiful possibilities, like I mentioned, that are available for us in life in general, in our relationships, in possibility, in our creativity, in joy. And so when we live in the vibration of shame or resentment, we're seeing ourselves incorrectly, basically, is the short story. We're not perceiving ourselves in our true light. We're not perceiving ourselves accurately, and we're making a judgment on ourselves. And we humans really like to get off on making all kinds of judgments. And self-judgment is one of the biggest forms of judgment. And in fact, any kind of judgment that you project out onto the world is going to come right back to how you view and see yourself, like where you don't allow grace for yourself, where you can't soften, where you can't accept, where you can't allow a mistake. If there's rigid perfectionism, which is incredibly insidious and self-harming and abusive to yourself. And so your self-concept is going to dictate all your other relationships, not just with people, but with energy, with circumstances, with money, with life. The compassion is what allows us to see things clearly. It restores sight. And it's also when we're in that state of being blocked or resentment or shame, then it's like we have this heavy blanket that keeps us very weighted and anchored. So it's very hard to elevate and get off the ground when we're in that lower state of consciousness. It's possibly the lowest state. And I've talked about David Hawkins' map of consciousness before, but shame is of the lowest vibrational frequency. And I've really experienced that to be true. And the interesting thing about shame is that in a way, it's not real because it can only live in the dark. And the moment that it comes into the light, it has no power. It's the light completely diffuses it, and it can't be. It's like little vampires, like when the sun comes up. So, its nature is to continue to talk down and to keep you very much in that dark place and like keep it hidden away. And there's usually a lot of secrecy, and we don't want to expose that because that's the nature of shame, is it doesn't want to be seen. But that's very much internalized information. It doesn't belong to you. It was most likely projected onto you through someone else's unprocessed shame. And so when we can meet ourselves in that and rescue those parts of ourselves, then we can really bring that into the light, and we don't have to live with that anymore. We're taking a little micro break from the podcast here so that I can tell you really quick about Aligned, Abundant, and Free. This is a 7-day mind, body, soul detox to clear your vessel, reclaim your energy, and return to your inner authority. It very much is in alignment with everything this episode is about today, in being able to be more receptive and open to abundant possibility when we clear the things away that are simply taking up space in us and do not align. So go ahead and sign up for that. It is very low commitment across the board. It's manageable and accessible for anybody, regardless of your schedule. These are recordings that you will get lifetime access to, a Facebook private group that you'll have access to me in. And if you sign up in the next couple days, you'll get a 50% off discount. So go ahead, check the link in the show notes. I can't wait to see you there. So switching gears, a lot of times people don't realize if they're being really hard on themselves, if they're holding themselves to an unrealistically high standard, if they have resentment towards themselves. Just like how in last episode I talked about how people have a lot of denial and don't recognize or aren't easily able to acknowledge when they have resentment or anger towards somebody, because of a just chronic, long-term conditioned dynamic. And this is a dynamic that's most likely very old, that came in, that was conditioned very young. And then we just reinforce it, we build on it, we take on that critical inner parent voice, and then we continue to live out either some form of abuse, some form of negative messaging towards ourselves that maybe we received, maybe through experience or chronic, consistent conditioning that was harmful or abusive as a child. We just step into the shoes of that critical parent and we take on that role. And so this is a process of reparenting ourselves, of course, but how do we know? Like, what are some of the ways and the signs and the ways that this shows up? I'm going to tell you a few of them just so you can go, oh yeah, check, 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 or not at all. Hey, yay. So lack of self-acceptance, right? Perfectionism. Nothing is good enough. Guilt, shame, self-criticism, negative inner dialogue. Anyone? Excessive discouragement. If you're feeling discouraged and there's no person outside of you like lashing you or discouraging you, guess who's doing it? You are. You might not realize it, but there's probably a good amount of negative self-talk going on that's keeping you very small and low. I really relate to this. Playing small as a result of it, holding yourself back. In more extreme cases, and there's a whole spectrum with this, with addiction, self-harm, depression, any sort of disassociation, wanting to get away from yourself. It's like I was saying to someone recently, if you have intimacy blocks in your relationship, it's because there's resentment there. Like there's this big hunkin' resentment that you aren't aware of, and you just think maybe you're not attracted to the person anymore, but actually it's because there's something that's bothering you that you haven't addressed, that you haven't gotten clear on, because it likes to hide out in plain sight. Does that make sense? So here's the truth about this. None of this stuff originated in you. None of it. Not an ounce of it. Okay? Do you guys ever see a baby being like super hard on themselves, self-loathing, full of shame? Like, no, they're peaceful, beautiful beacons of light, and they're at peace. They're at one with themselves, and they're just able to bask in their beautiful delta waves and all is well. And they're just operating on the most incredible frequency, which is why people love to stare at babies, because they're just blown away by the simplicity of their state of being. And it's why a lot of times people are really moved and in awe, right, of little children and little babies. So sadly, as a result of being human and being raised by humans, this stuff is borrowed, it's pressed in, it's conditioned in, it's projected onto us, it's internalized. Most of it is unconscious. It's our interpretation of our experiences and events and improperly processed information that we then enter into a cycle and a dynamic with, and accumulate all these beliefs and ideas about ourselves and the world around us. And there's a whole variety of experiences with this. Victims of abuse frequently tend to continue that type of abuse towards themselves, and oftentimes will end up being attracted to abusive relationships until they learn to show up for themselves and break those cycles. And it's just being attracted and oftentimes drawn to what is conditioned and what is comfortable for them, and what feels normal when certain inappropriate things were normalized. The good news is that if it's not true, we can disengage and disidentify from it and come into the truth. And that is the process of turning inward and seeking the truth. And where is the truth? The truth is our original state. The truth is deep down within us, underneath all this conditioning and like these ideas and things that came in and covered it up temporarily. I want to talk a little bit about the subconscious and the hypnosis piece and that work, because it's such incredible work as to what we can effectively resolve when we get into the hardwiring of our subconscious, where all this stuff was laid down and these pathways are. And when we access those deeper states of hypnosis, like in alpha, but really mainly theta, we can remove those old pathways, those neural pathways, and lay down new tracks, lay down new ones for us to drop into a place where then our nervous system can be comfortable. Now, the nervous system is an incredible part of all this because our nervous system is really going to dictate what we have capacity for. So you might really want something for yourself, but if it doesn't feel safe and you haven't done that work of really getting present with yourself and reparenting yourself, which this work of self-forgiveness and compassion is asking you to do, then it's not going to be able to expand enough to accept all the wonderful possibility that is available for you. And so a lot of times people bump into this where they really want to make the change and they want the thing, but really it doesn't feel safe to their nervous system to accept it based on their interpretations and their experiences of their childhood and all that stuff that's deeply ingrained. So it's a process of really deeply reinforming the child, the truth of that child, seeing them in their true nature, processing grief, and really being able to see yourself and honor yourself. And so if as a child, you weren't allowed to show a certain emotion, or you weren't allowed to play creatively. I've seen parents shut down and dictate the way their children play, even when it's like perfectly harmless, but for some reason it triggers the parent in some way, and then they restrict their children's creativity. And so then they start to self-monitor and not allow themselves to do something that their soul is really seeking to explore and expand in. Then we get to allow ourselves to do this as an adult by dipping into those places in us and reaccessing those beautiful natural states of creativity and joy in our subconscious. Those are natural states. That's who we were born. That's who we're made to be. So anything that says, no, you're not allowed, is not a voice of truth. And that's a pretty good indicator as to what's dictating things. So why does self-forgiveness and self-compassion feel challenging? Because it's asking us to do the opposite of what that wound is dictating. So oftentimes these deep wounds of unworthiness through early attachment and those experiences are whispering things like, you should have known better. You can't be forgiven. I don't deserve, blank. That's not allowed for me. Or however it shows up. This compassion, and when we show up in a loving way, we're challenging very old, long-standing beliefs that have taken up residence and are very comfortable in us. And, shame, interestingly, is processed in the limbic system. And it's often running off of old imposed information and stories that aren't true, but they feel true. And so because it feels true, oftentimes your nervous system is going to override reality completely, because these protective parts that formed are going to show up and be like, excuse me, we're in charge here. We've been flooding this system for long enough, and we're going to do it again. Now, your protective parts don't want to hurt you. Your nervous system doesn't want to hurt you. It wants to keep you safe. It wants to protect you. It's just operating off of misinformation or information that no longer applies to your current reality. So maybe it applied well and good when you were 7 and it served to protect you, but now it does not apply. It's just getting in the way. And so it needs to be reinformed. And this is where parts work is really powerful, and any of that deeper subconscious, getting into the hardwiring and those beliefs are going to be really instrumental in creating that change for you and reinforming and getting yourself back online. So just to talk about the brain for a little bit, your amygdala is part of the brain that's part of your limbic system that processes specifically emotional states, emotional pain, fear, anger, but it doesn't always know what's real. It doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So that's that whole nervous system explanation. And the thing to really recognize and look at is that shame does not lead to change. Negative self-talk doesn't lead to change. As long as we stay operating from a place of schism and divide, where we have all these different parts that are internally warring against each other, where you want one thing, but then the other part shows up and it's like, no, you can't do this, or you're not good enough, or no, you don't know enough, or whatever it is. We have to find some harmony in our inner ecosystem. This concept of dividing in order to conquer is very much ingrained in humanity from the beginning. And, Christ says, and I'm going to read this so I don't mess it up. One moment, please. Okay, here we go. Here's the Dewey Rames version, Matthew 12:25. It says, "And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said to them, every kingdom divided against itself shall be made desolate, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then shall his kingdom stand? Then the kingdom of God has come upon you." So it's really about restoring our inner kingdom. And when there's this division and schism and split within, we're not strong, we're divided. So spiritually speaking and biblically speaking, this is a very old concept. When there's division and there's disharmony within a group, between two brothers, in a community, in a spiritual body, in a church, in a family, in a nation, then it's not strong. It's not united on one front. And so you look at a family, when two parents are excessively at odds, it causes such disharmony and dysregulation for the whole family. And you look at it like politically speaking, in this polarization and how divided we are, it's alarming. And how there's a lack of acceptance for other people's viewpoints and opinions. And there's not even any unity in our differences. Like, that's not healthy. There's something wrong when that's happening. There's disharmony within the individual. And so when we come back into that inner homeostasis and get back online with all parts of ourselves, then we are strong. Like, we're strong in adversity. We're strong, period. And we can do anything. Like it says, in Christ, I can do all things. But I have to be able to accept and access that power and that spirit within me. And how am I going to do that if I'm in full flight from myself or disassociation and I can't even be present with the divine presence? Like, what does it mean to be present, right? That is to be present with presence. What is presence to you? So the other benefits and things that happen as a result of it, and why we feel strong, is because there's no internal conflict or battle that's actually incredibly depleting and draining. We feel valued, right? We feel differently. We feel uplifted. We know our worth. We know that anything is possible. And we move forward with that idea and that outlook, and therefore we are open to abundant possibility. And, in Christianity, we talked a little bit about, but God's grace is ever present. Forgiveness is always available. As long as we're alive, it's like, hey, I'm here. Are you ready to receive all that I have for you? If only you'll accept and soften and meet me. And then we talked a little bit about last time, this idea and concept spans most world religions and philosophies. In Buddhism, they point very much to compassion being the gateway to awakening and enlightenment. Like, of course. How could it be any different? 12-step recovery. Hi. 12-step recovery is basically just a map and an outline of universal spiritual principles that don't disalign with any of these faiths or religions. It's also the thing that's required, that inner homeostasis that we come back to, and forgiveness is a big part of that process, and making right within ourselves so that we get free, so that we don't have to disassociate anymore, because the addict has a particularly low threshold and tolerance for that inner schism and conflict. Like, they're like, peace out, I'm leaving, I'm gonna go get high now. So whatever that drug of choice is, they're gonna go, and that's going to be their default and their outlet, right? If they can't make peace within themselves. We cannot afford to stay empty vessels, because we're spiritual beings. And so these vessels were designed to be filled spiritually. And that's the only thing that's going to fill them, is truth, and that which has resonance with our deeper beings. So this process, you're like, how do I do this? Simply, this process is about showing up for ourselves consistently, like with consistent, ruthless compassion, love, patience, presence, and to be willing to see, hold space for, and allow. And it's just like any relationship. Why wouldn't it make sense that we would have to be consistent? I mean, think about like if you met your soulmate, you're like, oh my gosh, that's my soulmate. Let's get married. And then you get married, and then you're like, great, we got married. That's my soulmate. Now I'm just going to ignore them. I'm just going to talk to them occasionally. Like, how are they going to feel? They're not going to be like, oh, wow, I really feel valued. I really want to stay married to this person. Eventually, they're going to be like, I guess they don't like me. I guess I'll go elsewhere and find somebody else. Oh, that person appreciates me. Okay. And the thing is once we do and we start to get to know ourselves better, we love who we are. Like, we can't not, because we're made, if you believe this, perfectly in God's image. I'm not saying we're perfect, but we're made perfectly because we're made by perfection. So however we are, whoever we are, we have the opportunity, we're asked to come into full acceptance of, in order to fall in love with ourselves, not in a weird, egocentric, like narcissistic way, but in a way that enables us to really embody those qualities of love and shine that forth and reconnect with the human race and be that in the world. You know what I'm saying? So bottom line, and just to recap, true healing happens when we forgive and we show ourselves the same compassion that we would show somebody that we truly love. Why would we be any different? This is about choosing yourself. It's about freeing yourself. It's about coming back online, getting centered, finding balance, establishing harmony within. You're opening and accessing abundance, love, joy, all the good things, creativity, and the flow of the spirit to operate through us so that we can be of service and be a light in the world. And it takes you back to the home of who you are. And that's where we start and that's where we end. So we really want to make nice our home because that's our home. I don't know if that ever is not going to be our home. So we want to really tend to that and make it a place where we want to be. All right. I love you guys. Feel free to give me any feedback, questions, email me, DM me, all the things. Leave me a review. Follow my YouTube channel. Love you. Bye. Have a great week. Thank you for tuning in to the May Be Mindful podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and improve. For more information, resources, and exclusive content, visit our website at maybemindful.com or go ahead and follow us over on Instagram at maybemindful. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please give me a follow, screenshot the episode, and go ahead and tag me until next week when I bring you another thought-provoking and inspiring topic. Until then,